surround yourself with and learn from, right? Because they're still going to make mistakes, but they've probably already made them. Maybe avoid some.
It reinforces the fact you see other people, sold a deal and made $1 million on it. They're amazing people, but they're no too much different than how I am.
It took me, again, about 14 months to prove everyone wrong. But, I bought my first property before any of my peers did. You guys need to get out there and do. You just got to be able to deal with criticism. Anyone successful is going to tell you that, like, people would reach out and say, hey, man, I love these things you're talking about. I would love to, kind of work with you guys. I got some capital. I don't have the experience, but...
What's going on, guys? Got another podcast here. We got a special guest. We got Kevin Bupp here. He's a CIO of Sunrise Capital Investors. He's been a full-time investor since the age of 19. Super excited to have him on the podcast. Kevin, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, fellas, thanks for having me here. Excited to be here with you.
Yeah. So for people that don't know you, haven't seen you on YouTube, you've been doing content for 11 years, I believe you said before we joined. That's amazing. That's crazy. The commitment that it takes, the grind to build a podcast, to build a personal brand, to have one of the top real estate podcasts out there. So tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background starting at age 19. That's insane, being a full-time investor. So talk us through all that.
Yeah, no, we'll do. And I feel like I just aged myself quite a bit by giving you all those data points. But no, all good. So I'm 46 now. So I've been doing this for over 2 decades. To your point, I got involved in real estate at 19. It took me over a year to buy the first property. So I actually bought the first property at the age of 20, but it's been a full-time commitment ever since. I mean, about the closest I ever got to a real job was tending bar at the age of 18. In Pennsylvania, you have to be 18 to bartend and serve drinks, which is interesting because 18 to serve it, 21 to drink it. But anyway, I won't go down that rabbit hole. So I this is backing up a little bit. I got started like a lot of folks do in single family. I just happened to meet a gentleman local in my area in Pennsylvania where I grew up that was a local real estate investor. I met him through my girlfriend at the time because my girlfriend's mother was dating this guy, David. And so, I met David. I'd never met really a business owner before. My parents were both, both full-time employees, 9 to 5s, W-2. Neither one of my parents went to college. My dad went to like a short technical school. But so college wasn't really in the cards for me. I did go to local community college, but I didn't feel like that was going to be a good fit. I wasn't really academically driven. And I'd always been entrepreneurial from like a young age, from shoveling snow, mowing grasses to at 12, I got a paper route, had that for a number of years, learned how to install, electronics and vehicles. Like back when it was cool to have a loud sound system. I had an older brother. And so his friends would bring their cars over and I would install, amplifiers and speaker boxes in their car and make just anything to make money so I could buy the things that I wanted at that age. Because we didn't go without, but we also didn't have a lot, kind of Christmas time and birthdays. Mm-hmm. Those were the 2 opportunities to actually maybe get the, whatever the coolest new, bike or skateboard was at the time, or sports equipment or milk truck car, I don't know, whatever I was into. And so again, I was always trying to make my own money and do side hustles. And, but anyway, I got introduced to real estate through David just because I, learned what he did. I saw him over at my girlfriend's house quite often and learned that he owned single family properties and small multifamily properties in the town where I grew up. And to me, that didn't mean much. What it meant is that he had these houses that people rented from him. He used to tell me they pay my mortgage for me. And then typically I make a few $100 in addition to that each month from each property. And he had like 30 or 35 properties, give or take. And so like, I'm doing the math. I'm like, well, that's pretty cool. That's pretty amazing. And he drove a pretty cool car and had a flexible lifestyle. So I'm like, I like this. And I like David. I became friends with him. And long story short, about 3 months into our just, becoming acquaintances, he invited me to a conference. His business partner couldn't go. He'd already paid for it. It was a 3-day conference in Philadelphia. Basically, Ron LeGrand taught it. This guy's still around today. He's out there, teaching you how to flip and wholesale houses. And so I went to this conference, and that was it, man. That was a light bulb moment for me. I met a lot of people at this conference that were doing what I felt were just huge things. They were flipping houses or had rental portfolios and making a ton of money. And I didn't feel like they were any smarter than I. They just knew more than I did at that point. And so I made David an offer that he couldn't refuse when we got back, and I offered to come work for him for free. He was a solopreneur. I saw a lot of, he struggled with like returning phone calls on time and emails and technology, just basic stuff. He was successful, but he was about 25 years older than I, so he struggled with some of the things that I felt I could add value into his business. And so he accepted my offer, and I went to work for him for free, man. So in between going to class, and then basically evening bartending. So I had a lot of my days for free. I worked for him for like 14 months, doing anything he needed, dropping off supplies at a house he was renovating, dropping off leases, picking up leases, returning phone calls, emails, putting out signs for him for homes for rent or homes for sale. And as a result of that, I learned what he did, why he did it, how he did it, what he said, how he said it, why he said it, to who, and I bought the first property at the age of 20. I used some money, I'd say bartending, and one of the relationships I built through David was a private lender, local lender, and bought that first property, and then just was off and running from there. I mean, really, I wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel. I was just trying to basically, hey, what David did worked, and so I wanted to replicate the process, and so that was the start of it. And then I fast forward, I bought a few hundred single family homes in my mid 20s. Got into commercial real estate in my late 20s. Started buying some other just random things, into some industrial, some retail, office. I've owned a little bit about everything. I've had like every food group over the years, and then landed on mobile home parks back in 2011, and I've been buying those ever since. That's been kind of our core asset class. So I've had quite a long run. Lost it all in 2008, rebuilt it starting in like 2011, 2012. And then now I always joke and say I'm kind of like the second phase of my journey. The second phase looks a lot different than the first phase. Yeah. And we have our company, the profile looks very different. We've got some incredible team members. Back then it was more so just me, maybe a few assistants, a few like admins, but it was like me kind of running the entire show. Today, our organization looks very different than what it did, 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah. You touched on something important. We just got back on earlier this week from a commercial real estate conference. And I think, we talk about this quite a bit, but the power of being like in the right room. And you touched on how your first exposure to real estate was, a mentor, which we talk a lot about. And then you went to this conference. So talk to us a little bit, because, I think we mentioned this before, but our target audience is somebody who wants to either get into commercial real estate for the first time, or they're transitioning from residential into commercial. So I'm wondering, talk to us about the importance of going to these conferences and these educational events, because I feel like there's, people underrate how valuable that is.
Yeah, I mean, they're hugely valuable. You're right. I mean, power is proximity, getting around others. I mean, if you want to do something, the fastest way to get there. I mean, surely there's a lot of resources today. I mean, if anyone ever tells me they can't do something or I can't figure it out, they just haven't tried, because the resources there, right? And there's probably multiple sources of it. But I mean, if the fast track, at least as what I feel as it relates to real estate, is if you determine what you want to do or what area you want to be in and kind of where you want to plant your flag, well, then go find the others that are doing it, right? That are a little further along than you, that you can surround yourself with and learn from, right? Because you're still going to make mistakes, but they've probably already made them. You can maybe avoid some and shorten the learning curve quite a bit. And so, I mean, that's kind of how I view conferences, and I still attend a lot. I probably say I say no more nowadays than I probably used to, but I still attend probably 3 or 4 a year, whether it be industry conferences or just conferences to kind of continue sharpening my business acumen and or even personal coaching. I go to I have a group of guys I get together with every quarter, just to talk shop and learn what they're doing. They're learning what I'm doing, and we share ideas. So it's just all about continual growth, and I don't know how you do that unless you're continuing to surround yourselves with others that are helping you elevate yourself, your business. And I don't know how you do that on an island. And so, again, the easy way is just go to these conferences, right? You sign up for events, sign up for coaching, and surround yourselves with others that are much further along than you are, or where you want to be.
Yeah, 100%. I think you said it perfectly. You said you went to the event and you saw that people were doing all these things that weren't that different from you. And I feel like even if you go to one of these conferences and you get all sorts of educational knowledge, especially when you're new, there's a curve. When you're new, you'll go and you'll learn a ton. And then maybe you'll go to your second conference and you'll learn a little less because you know some of the basics, and then so on and so forth. But I feel like you can always take away little nuggets. Like this last conference we went to, there's quite a bit of information we already knew because we'd gone to 3 or 4 of them. But there was always these little nuggets we were pulling out. But more importantly, like you said, it reinforces the fact you see other people, oh, that guy just, sold a deal and made $1 million on it. Or that guy, did a deal where he's making $6,000 a month in cash flow. And you're like, they're just, they're amazing people, but they're not too much different than how I am. So it's really eye-opening, and it's like a mindset shift. So if anything, it really just elevates your mindset, which arguably is one of the most important things, especially in the beginning, because most people are surrounded by, and I figured this out after pretty, long into my journey. I haven't been in it as long as you, but 7 years about. And early on, I would be like, yeah, I want to buy real estate, or I want to do this. And people would just shut it down so quick. Like, and you don't realize that that's how damaging that is in the beginning. But then you look back and you get around the right people who are like, what are you talking about? Like, you can do way better versus someone who's telling you, no, you can't do that. Or this person, you're going to fail this way or whatever it may be. You have to get around.
Nuts.
Yeah, it's nuts, right?
Well, it's funny because so again, when I got started, the funny thing is that, I'd go 10 bar and like, if you've ever, anyone's listening, if you ever worked in the hospitality industry, like it's pretty common. Like, now I met some really good friends there. I still have lifelong friends that I met during that stint tending bar for about 2 years. But like, it's pretty common that you work late and then you go out and have some beers afterwards. And like, it's pretty much expected. But, I tried to be secretive about it initially because I didn't want the criticism, and because a lot of the guys I was tending bar with, some of them were kind of lifelong bartenders, right? They that was their path, and nothing wrong with that. But like, I wanted something bigger, but I also didn't feel like dealing with the criticism. But more important, David was about 25 years older than I, and that's just weird. I don't know, when you're 19 hanging out with a guy that's, 45 years old, it's odd in the eyes of your peers. Right. And so, but when my friends found out what I was doing, they're like, why are you hanging out with this guy, David, so much? Like, this is a little weird, man. They started like giving me shit about it and trying to push my buttons, but I just shut up and I just took it and just put my head down and continued doing what I was going to do. And kind of in my, at least how I operate is like, I want to prove you wrong. I'm not going to argue with you about it. Just let me prove you wrong. Let me show you by action. And so it took me, again, about 14 months to prove everyone wrong. But, I bought my first property before any of my, peers did. I mean, like literally, I bought that first investment. Well, there's investment, just a piece of real estate before any of them, they might have been talking about. And I'm like, you guys need to get out there and do, stop giving me shit about hanging out with David. Here's the results,
Yeah.
Proof is in the pudding.
Yeah. And I think part of that too is similar to content when you're like, you're putting it out there in the open because like, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. This is what I'm trying to accomplish. I was telling a buddy of mine about this yesterday. It's the more that you put it out there, the more it's going to come back to you. Like, hey, I'm out here trying to buy houses. And, then you start getting the ears of lenders. Like you mentioned, you were building a relationship with a lender that was friends with David as well. Like that stuff is very helpful. And, hey, I want to, give you financing to help you buy your first deal. Like that's a huge door to open.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, no, it's funny. Even my podcast, I got so much criticism when I started that. Number one, because podcasting it was still like in its infancy stage. Some folks didn't even know what a podcast was, but even my really close friends to this day, it's funny. I got one of my best friends and he's incredibly successful. And this is, when I started my podcast, I was pretty much broke because I'd lost everything in '08. So I built something and I completely lost it. And I was at the tail end of that chaos and I had bad credit. I didn't have money. I was in a rough financial shape, but I still had some dreams and wishes. And when I started that, he's like, number one, it cost money to start. It wasn't a lot, but back then it was a lot to me, the hosting and just the equipment, the basic stuff, right? And the time commitment. He's like, what are you doing, man? He's like, why don't you focus your energy on actually, getting out there and rebuilding? I was like, I am. He's like, how? Like you're spending, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a week doing this and it costing you money. And like, how many downloads you even get? And I'm like, why does that matter? You know what I mean? Like I used to have to defend myself for probably for like 2 years. Even with my wife, and I love she's very supportive of everything I do, but she gave me shit, of like, this is costing us money. I don't see the real benefit of you doing this like a couple years in. And then once we, brought our first dollar capital in, and that's not why I started the show, but like we had some investors that ultimately, teamed up with us on some deals. And I'm like, well, there you go. I think that just paid for the last 3 years. Right. And so let me continue on. And, I didn't know this was going to be a result of it, but I knew something good would happen. Just let me figure it out and let me focus on it. So, but you just got to be able to deal with criticism. Anyone successful is going to tell you that like, it wasn't easy. And there was more people saying you can't, or you shouldn't than you can. And I support you in your dreams.
100%. And it gets easier. Like we're saying, if you get around people who are pushing like you are too, because then they'll actually encourage you instead of like attack you. But I'm curious, asking for selfish reasons, but what other benefits have you seen from your podcast aside from just like having investors and building trust?
I got a really good one. And again, I literally, the main reason I started that show, I was an early adopter of listening to podcasts. So I probably started listening to them back in '08. 9. And back then there was literally a handful of real estate shows, and most of them were on single family investments. There was the real estate guys were around and they would hit on everything. And that's still a good show today. Jason Hartman, he's one of the old school guys. He was around, but he's really a single family guy. That's what he talked about for the most part. And there might've been a few others, but most of them were residential related podcasts. And it's not that wasn't an interest to me. I'd already been down that path and I really wanted to focus my efforts on commercial investments. And so it wasn't out there. And I figured that if I wanted to listen to that, I'm sure there's there's others that want to listen to folks that have built big empires with commercial real estate. And so I started because it didn't exist. I literally had no other intent other than two things. Number one, if I wanted to listen to that, I'm sure there's got to at least be a handful of others out in the world somewhere that have an interest in this content. And the second was, if the only thing that came out of it was that I literally got to interview, spend an hour every week, sometimes more than an hour, with folks that were way smarter than me, way more successful than me. And I could ask them, unfiltered, any question I want, and they would give me the real answer. That was all worth it. Like, that was it. Like, that was, in my mind, it was an investment. And I was basically getting a different mentor every week that had already proven to be successful and had already been down, a path further than I, and I could ask them anything I wanted. And so like that was the main purpose. But back to your original question about some of the other benefits other than investors. And so that was by default. The investors just came after I gave. I talk about deals we were doing. Just people would reach out and say, hey, man, I love these things you're talking about. I would love to, kind of work with you guys. I got some capital. I don't have the experience, but we'd love to put some capital work because it seems like you guys are doing some pretty cool deals. And I'd like to be a part of that. But the coolest thing that ever came out of my podcast, so when I started it, trying to crack the algorithm of Apple, and there was no information out there of how to do that, of how to, get on the top. And so I was like, reviews have to help, right? They can't hurt, positive reviews have to help. And so what I did in order to help facilitate 5-star reviews, or just reviews in general, I didn't make anyone do a 5-star. I just say, hey, take it upon yourself. But what I would do is every Friday, I would set aside 4 30-minute blocks on my calendar. I think it was from like, 2 to 4 p.m. And I used to tell them on the show, hey, anyone want to talk shop, talk real estate, whatever it might be, whether I can help you get into the business, maybe you're way further ahead than I, but we can just talk shop for 30 minutes. I'm not going to sell you anything. Let's just connect, again, proximity is power. And that literally people booked. I was booked out a year and a half. I mean, literally. So every Friday I talked to 4 new people that were listeners of the show. And at the end of it, I would just say, hey, if you enjoyed this, if you felt like I gave any value, if you feel like you've gotten value from the show, I would just kindly ask that you take a few minutes and leave a review. I wouldn't require them to do it. I would let them take it upon themselves. And that helped us boost reviews. And so, but during the reason why I bring this up, during one of these 30-minute calls, I met a guy by the name of Brian. Brian was a successful, corporate dude. He was a D1 athlete, this, that, and the other. And he had been listening to the show for a year and a half or 2. And he was like, he was like, I got into the occupation I'm in because it was the highest paying job out of college. And I've got a kind of like a 3 or 4 year plan. Like I'm living on a per diem. I've been living in a hotel for the last 2 years, traveling the country, making a lot of money and not spending a dime. And I want to put capital in real estate. That is my intent. And I love what you're doing. I love mobile home parks. He's like, I would love to get more involved and help you grow your business. He's like, I've been part of, a couple companies here in the last 3 or 4 years. He's been corporate. One of them was a startup. I watched the guy grow it from one guy to like literally he had an exit of like $54 million. He's like, I think I can help you where you're at. I haven't done it, but he's like, I'm a smart dude. And this guy continued to kind of, reach out to me every couple of months. And I'm like, I don't know, Brian, I don't know how you can help me. I'm just kind of getting restarted here. We're doing some cool stuff, but I can't pay you. Like, I'm not in a position where I could pay you. Within a year, this guy literally quit his job, moved down to Florida. And I'm like, I don't know what you're doing coming down here. I don't have a position for you. Well, this guy ultimately is the other half of Sunrise Capital Investors, Brian Spear. He's he's my business partner in crime. And literally I met him through the podcast and we've grown an amazing business together. And so biggest benefit that ever came out of the show outside of capital and investors was literally my business partner. So you just never know who you're going to talk. Like, you never know who you're going to talk to, who you're going to meet, who you're going to connect with. And I was not, that was not my intent. My intent was literally just to talk to folks, get to meet people in those 30-minute segments. And it literally turned into a partnership that has really put rocket fuel behind the growth of our organization. So he and I have been working together now since 2014, and it's been a fun ride. Or not 2015.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
You go ahead and say something, Jesse.
Sorry, that was a long answer to your question, but it's a cool one. It's a cool story, cool. And Lily, Sunrise is what it is today, not because of Brian, but because of Brian and I meeting each other, right? And basically our complementary efforts and skill sets working together in unison and having a vision of bringing it to life.
Yeah, there's a guy we've had on the show who's doing really well right now. And he has a podcast. His name's Cassidy Warren. So shout out to him. He's awesome. But anyways, he was saying, I was talking to him about podcasting and stuff the other day. And he was like, yeah, man, everything gets easier on the other side of reach and reputation. And so it's like, you're a real estate business. You might attract great partners, or, you might attract great investors through the podcast. Or the more people who know about what you're doing, the the more, people, there's a chance of somebody wanting to come and join you, like you're talking about here. So I firmly believe that. And, we've seen an amazing result from the podcast too. And our mindset was exactly what you said. We were like, well, if we can ask somebody to come on our podcast for an hour, way smarter than us, way further ahead of us in their journey, and we can get tips from them, it's basically like free coaching for an hour. And then, we can put it out there for other people to listen to and also get, coaching. So it's value to us, it's value to them. And then also hopefully, as we slowly build an audience, the people who come on the show will get more reach. We went to that conference last week. One person said, hey, I had somebody reach out to me because I was on your podcast and they're actually going to work for me now. And I was like, that's amazing. That's the first we've heard of that. And then another guy was like, yeah, we had someone reach out to me. He's heard me on a podcast like forever ago, but we never connected. Then he heard me again on your podcast and he reached out. Like, that's so cool that people are actually reaching out based on that.
And like Ram saying, like, to kind of piggyback off him, like, it's the after the cameras cut that a lot of the value gets added to us, right? It's the people we don't know coming up to us. It's even like, like after this podcast, like we flew out to Austin, Texas with our guy, and he's like pouring into us, giving us advice, mentoring us outside of the podcast. Like he was obviously mentoring us on the podcast, and it's just crazy. Like these guys, they want to give you more advice, just even off the podcast too. It's incredible.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. But I wanted to bring it back a little bit for our audience. I was curious. So after 2008, when you lost everything, you had a little bit of you called it a phase 2. I'm wondering that mental shift and how you the lessons that you learned from 2008 and how you were able to get into commercial after all of that when you had no money.
Yeah, it's a great question. It was rough. I won't sugarcoat it. It was a challenging time. Bank accounts got garnished. I mean, it got pretty bad. Personal home was in foreclosure and the credit now was shot. And so I couldn't leverage credit to go do anything at all, even like go buy a car. Right. So I literally had to, which is fine. Like it taught me a different type of discipline. I always thought I was a disciplined guy. But it just taught me a different type of discipline. I literally couldn't go buy anything. Even my credit card companies, I never defaulted on any of my credit cards, but they saw the foreclosures happening and judgments and they shut them all off. And so Discover was the only one that kept me, and they literally lowered my limit down to $500. And that was the only credit card I had, that or whatever cash I had in my name. Outside of that, I had a four. I stopped looking at it, but it was in the mid 4s credit score. And it means I literally couldn't do anything on credit whatsoever. So it taught me to be, it taught me a form of resilience that I didn't know before. I mean, because I had like the path forward looked very different than the prior years, right? And it was all new to me, and I couldn't have a reliance upon anything but myself. And so I went into a deep cave of health and fitness. It was like the only thing I could control. I couldn't control process servers knocking on my door, serving me another lawsuit or another judgment being filed or another lien. I couldn't control that, but I could control how I felt and how much energy I had and my clarity and mental focus to try to get to the other side of this mess. And it took about 3 years and that wasn't even the other side. That was just kind of managing the initial damage control chaos to where I now had a little bit more time 3 years later to maybe focus on what could be next. What's the second go around look like? And so, I went on this like exploratory phase in like 2011. When I say that, I was down in Florida, and everyone around me, even the folks that were way more successful than I, had lost everything too. So I got stuck in this weird bubble of like everyone, like the world is ending for everybody. This is a shit show. And so I didn't pay attention to, I didn't pay attention to what was happening in the real estate market other than what was happening in my little world. I wasn't paying attention to like who was actually out there doing good things, like who was out there buying distressed properties when you should be buying them, right? At bargain basement prices. And so in 11, I went on this exploratory phase to find out what this new landscape looked like, right? And to figure out like what round 2 looked like for me. And honestly, I looked back at what worked and what didn't work in my portfolio, what I would do differently next time around. And I came to the realization that the single family stuff was really inefficient. Like we own stuff in 5 counties, and having leasing agents go to place, maintenance guys place to place. Mm-hmm. I realized that was a very inefficient part of what I owned. The apartment units I had were incredibly efficient. We'd have like 36 unit properties, 24 unit properties, and a maintenance guy, or a part-time maintenance guy that would handle everything. One leasing agent that could go lease multiple apartment units without driving more than, a few feet. And so just a very different game. And so I thought that the round 2 was going to be multifamily. Because what I realized earlier on is that, you go through this weird phase of like you're solopreneur by yourself, and you run out of, there's only so many hours in the day, and you run out of time, and you really need help. We all need to hire faster and fire faster, but hire faster is important. We always hire too late. And, but you can't hire if you don't have money. And so I knew that if I was just going to go start buying single family homes again or smaller properties, it would would take me quite a bit of time to get to a scale where I could afford to hire help. And I wanted to build a larger sustainable company to where I could bring, folks in and build a team around it. And so multifamily seemed to be the path, because I could go buy a building or two or three and literally have enough top line revenue to actually bring an admin in pretty quickly. It would have taken a lot longer going back the single family route. And so during this exploratory phase, I met a guy by the name of Randy, and just through a mutual friend, I was meeting as many people as I could to figure out what's next. And Randy was a commercial banker, recently retired. And I met him for lunch one day, not with no objective other than to meet someone new and expand my network. And Randy happened to own mobile home parks. And so he sold me on all the greatness of mobile home parks. I'd never considered that asset class. And literally after that 2-hour meeting with him, I vowed to go buy one and either prove or disprove, what Randy had told me. But at that point, I had about $70,000 to my name that I had like scrounged and like kept away from anyone garnishing accounts from. And so that had to work. Like literally that $70K, I had to do something with it. It was the only money I had. And a lot of folks are probably thinking like that's a lot of money, but like it is, but it isn't. I was living for like 3 years on nothing. I had no income. In fact, I had lots of judgments, and like I said, I had bank accounts garnished, and I had no credit. So this had to be the solution. And so I went and bought that first park in 2012. Had a private lender that came in on the deal. Private lender I had worked with many years prior and a lot of the single family stuff, and he helped us fund the deal, and we bought it up in Atlanta, and it was an REO, and that was kind of the kickoff of phase 2. Again, I thought it was gonna be multifamily. Mobile home parks are multifamily. It's a different type, but I had no idea what the hell. I mean, I knew what I was doing, but this asset class was entirely new. So I was taking quite a bit of a gamble. It was entirely empty. So I had no revenue when we bought it, and like it had to work. And we bought it cheap enough to where I figured, worst case, we could fire, sell the land underneath it and get our money back. But that wasn't the plan. The plan was actually to make money from it and have this be the springboard to, to round 2 of my business life. And so that, luckily, thank God, that worked out. It was tough, but the first one worked out. And then, fast forward, I guess 13 years, we've done, we've got about 400 million of assets under management at present time. And
that's incredible.
We currently own parks in, I think, 13 or 14 states, and have gone full cycle on roughly 20 of them. So like we've done a lot and grown a lot over the years, but it all started from a little tiny $200,000 mobile home park that we bought in Atlanta that was fully empty. It was an REO. I'd been sitting there vacant for 2 years. It was in rough shape, needed a ton of work, and had a bad reputation, but we went in and got our hands dirty, and I drove to Atlanta literally every week and I had my youngest son had just been born too. I drove, and it's an 8-hour drive. I drove up every single week, literally would stay in my car overnight and then drive back the next day just to meet with crews and run this project from afar, because we had 34 homes that we had to renovate. 34 homes we had to renovate, and it's really hard to find good, reliable folks that want to renovate mobile homes. And so it's just it was an interesting time, but was willing to do whatever it took to get back in the game and to rebuild again. So anyway,
that's so
enough
cool.
Rambling here. I'll stop my diatribe and
No, you're good. So a couple clarifying questions. Well, there's so many things there that I want to unpack, but I guess one of them is, so up until '08, it was all single family stuff. And then, you had that
single family. I did have a few hundred units of multifamily, a lot of smaller stuff, like smaller, meaning I think the smallest one was like a 10-unit property and the biggest was like a 70 unit. So actually but the thing is with and I won't go too far in this, but the multifamily it was weird because I was a partner in all this stuff, but it was a buddy of mine was that was kind of his business, and I was like more of a passive. It was they were JVs, but I was more of a passive investor. I was kind of running my single family machine, and I, until it was too late, I didn't realize that I should have just put all my eggs in the other basket, because the multifamily stuff it worked better for what my business was at the time. But outside of that, I did have a few other commercial. I'd started dabbling in commercial before the crash happened, so I had some self-storage stuff. Had a retail strip center, had a multi-tenant office building, and so I had some other random commercial stuff because I just started trying to feel out what else was out there. Bigger deals. I wanted to do bigger deals. I wanted to put more money to more capital to use, and so I was dabbling. I would say so. First phase, dabbling in commercial and multi, and second phase, all in 100% commercial real estate.
Okay, got it. That's so cool, because so many people make that shift. But the other thing I was going to point to is, like, we know in that mastermind group that we're in, there's a lot of very successful guys, but there's also some titans in the group who also have like $350 to $400 million portfolios. There's probably, I think 4 of them got up on stage and presented. And the interesting thing to hear is, like, I'm pretty sure every single one of them said they lost everything in '08, and then they built back to like a $350, $400 million portfolio. So I wonder if there's a correlation for like people who lost it all and then learned and then like just exploded. But I'm curious, like, more specifically, like, let's pretend you're talking to us as mentors and our audience who we have, we have a couple small buildings right now. all industrial. You hear people talk about that. People who are smart, they talk about how, yeah, well, I lost everything. How would you recommend somebody now building a portfolio to avoid that happening again to them?
What's up, guys? It's Graham here. I wanted to tell you something honestly that just blew me away. So I just got back from the Commercial Academy live event in Cleveland, and wow, the room was packed with people who drove hours to learn from presenters and people with combined several $1 billion in transactions. One guy even flew from Thailand, which is 2.5 days of travel just to be there. But here's what got me. We met regular people who went from buying single family rentals to owning entire shopping centers. J. Scott Shields' 7 moves to checkmate system isn't just a theory. We heard real case studies where this made people multiple millions of dollars. We watched attendees exchange contact information for deals happening in real time. Students there had closed their first deals within 6 months of learning this. Look, if you're tired of analyzing deals that never happen while others build wealth, listen up. Commercial Academy proves it only takes one deal, one time to change your life forever. Scott normally charges thousands of dollars for the training, but he's giving away his complimentary masterclass that shows you how to make $1 million on your next commercial deal. Text Scott Masterclass to 888-653-1199. That's Scott Masterclass to 888-653-1199. Don't be the person still thinking about it a year from now while everyone else is collecting rent checks. Get started today.
I'm gonna have to stop you right there. It's time for you to go all in on your commercial real estate dreams. Commercial Academy just dropped Fast Track. And honestly, this thing is a complete game changer for newbies. For one crazy low monthly price, you're going to get J. Scott Shields' comprehensive home study courses, which are decades of proven strategies recorded by Scott himself. They're going to be available to you the moment you get into the course. 2, you're going to get the powerful deal crunching software, opportunity evaluator, and quick checks. So you're going to be able to run numbers like a seasoned pro in minutes, not days or even weeks. And this is just icing on the cake. Your Fast Track membership comes with a free ticket to the next Commercial Academy live event. That's your golden ticket to learn, network, and be in the same room where it happens. If you've been waiting for the perfect time to start, honestly, there's just no other better time to get started. This is your golden ticket opportunity. Remember, it takes one deal, one time to change your life forever. Text Fast Track to 888-653-1199 right now. Again, that's Fast Track to 888-653-1199. Commercial real estate is where real fortunes are built, and Fast Track is your shortcut to get in the game.
One of the big changes I've made in my business and is we run much more robust sensitivity, and I didn't even know what a sensitivity analysis was last go round, right? But so we're really diligent about running pretty deep sensitivity analysis on like what's worst case scenario on this particular property, to where it could fall off the cliff. And so and we've got some way smarter folks on my team as well, way smarter than I am, financially trained that help us accomplish that. That's one big piece of the second piece is like our leverage. We are uber conservative, which doesn't necessarily produce the highest returns. But the funny thing is the last 3 years have proven that our business model works because like we're long-term guys, we're not looking to do like the fix flip model where we get in. And I feel like that's very speculative, and a lot of people did really well while they were doing well until the market shifted with that business model where you have to basically get in, you have to buy, add value, and then sell in order to actually achieve an IRR and achieve a return. A cash out refinance, your basis was too high. That's not going to work. Right? You got to sell it, right? You got to exit out of it. And so we've taken the opposite approach where we go in and number one, our leverage point typically is about 60%, sometimes 65. And so that doesn't produce the highest returns, but we're not return driven. We are, but we're not, trying to raise capital and bring investors in that are only focused on IRR. That's just not our business model. And so we want long-term stability. So the last 3 years, the majority of people I know that at least were in multifamily are getting their asses kicked because they didn't have that mantra. They were only pitching the highest returns. Well, guess what? Our returns were maybe lower while theirs were higher back then, but ours have remained consistent. We haven't stopped the distribution. We've had like 33 on time quarterly distributions, and our investors have continually received their proceeds in mailbox money every quarter for the last, couple of, literally it's never stopped. And so even when they're losing money in their other investments. So I think just being very cautious with leverage, that's really the only thing that can kick your ass. It really is on a deal. If you lose 100% of if you have a single tenant property and then that guy moves out and there's not a good way to backstop that could be another way. But traditionally it's debt, it's over leverage, to where the business plan doesn't go accordingly. Basically, the debt becomes burdensome, and ultimately it sends the deal to the grave. And so just having incredibly conservative debt and running a sensitivity analysis, knowing that like the world would almost have to end in order for this deal to go sideways. I mean, that's how we look at things. And it's interesting because it doesn't it's return driven, but it's not. And so but I think early on we decided that like, hey, let's not go after. There's like three buckets we put our investors in. You've got the bucket of folks that they've just started making money. Maybe they're an accredited investor, but like they've got a 30-year run left. Like they need to multiply that money and they need to take some additional risk in order for that money to compound, right? And so they're IR driven. That's what they want to get in, get out, keep their velocity of capital high. That's not for us. That's not our guy. And then you got the middle guy that's maybe been at it 10 years. So like he's got a net worth of $10 million. Risk tolerance a little lower, but still like he's return driven. I mean, he is like, he still needs to compound that money. He's not ready to retire just yet. He's not ready to go, sail on his boat and just let his money work for him, because he hasn't made whatever that baseline he's searching for of wealth. He hasn't made it there yet. So he's still working towards it. And then you got this last bucket. It's kind of wealth preservation. The guys that have made it, they just don't want to lose it. And they also don't want a tax event every 2-3 years every time you sell a property, right? Like you're giving them tax benefits when you buy something. You're giving them passive income on a quarterly basis. But every time I sell something, I got to have a good conversation, but a challenging conversation with them of like, hey, we killed it on this deal, but there's also depreciation, recapture. You're gonna, and I don't necessarily have another deal right now to put your money in. And that's a problem for that person because they're busy, sailing around the world or whatever the hell they're doing. And I just gave them a problem. I made them money, but I gave them a tax problem. And now they got to find another home or another investment for that capital that I just gave them back. And so we want the guys they want good returns, but they want stable assets and great markets. They don't need to have, high double-digit returns in order to get their appetite up. They just want me to make them money, not lose their money, and just keep it consistent. Keep it consistent in the good times, consistent in the bad times, and just have it be a linear path to where they can do whatever they want to do over the next 10, 15, 20, 25 years. And they know that their investment's safe with us, and we'll continually, hand them distributions and offer them the ability to continue living, whatever that lifestyle is that they're living. So what revolves around that individual bucket is low debt, low risk type properties. And for me, like that lets me sleep at night as well. These last 3 years, I literally have I've lost sleep on other deals I've invested in because they've lost money, but I have not lost any, and we haven't lost a dime. We don't have deals that have gone sideways. We have no debt maturities. I haven't lost, a minute of sleep on anything inside our own portfolio. And I think it's just from us being incredibly diligent and conservative as we've built this thing.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things there. During our event this past weekend, the guy was talking a lot about like getting seller finance debt, because that debt helps you sleep better at night. You don't have to worry about, debt maturity as much. And also the point you bring up about lifestyle, like what you're talking about is more of a lifestyle investing as opposed to these guys that you're talking about that are out here trying to get 20% IRRs because they're going to go do this and then they're going to do all this work. And then now they're going to be able to raise rents to X amount so that they can have that return to have that IRR exit. I like that stable income. I think everybody does. And I think that's why everybody gets into real estate, right? And so for me and Graham, we're trying to build our portfolio to get to a certain amount of cash flow so that we feel better because we're on that brokerage line of like, okay, we have money. Now we don't. Oh, shoot. We need to get something else under contract. Make sure it closes, I feel like a lot of people are like that. And I feel like there's a lot of people that aren't even in the real estate world that are, working their 9 to 5 that want to have real estate so that they can have cash flow so that they can leave their 9 to 5. What do you suggest is the best way? And there's so many ways to get to skin this cat, but to get to that $5,000 of cash flow, to get to $10,000 cash flow.
I do think that, I might be shooting myself in the foot by saying this, but let's make the assumption that individual actually they're a high income earner, right? Like they've got a good W-2 and they're making good money. But like they spent like they don't have any, like they're exchanging hours for dollars, right? Yeah. And so they're trying to get out of that rat race and that rigmarole. I don't think it's possible for that individual that's making maybe a few $100,000 a year, that's maybe just barely have met the accreditation status. I don't think it's possible for that person to think that they can just go put their money in a normal environment when, rent growth isn't 20% a year or some crazy stuff like that, or things aren't selling for 2.5 caps. I don't think it's possible for that person to get a short path to that $5,000 a month of passive cash flow from just investing as a passive investor, as an LP in other deals. It can happen. And like, again, there was a run for a number of years in the multifamily stuff where those guys were, selling them even sooner than the business plan was completed. And they were given, 30-40% returns on capital, right? Like if you could have a sustainable 5-10 year path like that, then you could probably do it as a passive investor. And so, but I don't think in a normal sense you can do it as just a passive investor. I think it'd be very difficult just getting started. And so I do think that I do think you can achieve that by buying a property yourself or being a JV with one other person or whatever, like owning a majority or a large portion of the deal yourself and getting your hands dirty. I think that's the fastest way there. I think you got to get your hands dirty for the most part in order to take those first couple steps and build a little bit of a basis. And then you can start compounding it from there. You can start, if you have a big win, you hit a home run or hit a triple, and then you can start having more flexibility with, putting some over here passive. I'm going to go do another deal by myself though, right? And kind of build upon that. And until you can get to the point where you're making enough money on this little side hustle that then maybe you're making so much you can put it passively with other groups because you just don't have the time to do it all yourself. But I think you can get to that $5,000 a month by literally it just takes one property. I mean, if we're talking commercial real estate, and there's not one specific I say that's better than the other. I mean, we love mobile home parks and we love parking, but I'll give you an example, like the parking, and I'm using this one because it doesn't. I just want to show folks what's out there, and we talk about going direct to owner and things like that. The very first parking property we bought, we were still getting started in parking. This is late 2020 when we bought the first one. This was a new asset class for us. We've been studying it for a while, for a number of years, but we did a direct mail to a number of cities. And we ended up buying a surface parking lot in Wilmington, downtown historic Wilmington, North Carolina. I'm using this one because you guys, I know you're based in North Carolina as well.
Yeah,
and so downtown historic Wilmington.
I might have parked there
bought
before.
this. What's that?
I said I might have parked there before. We go to Wilmington.
Yeah, possibly. It's on Princess. It's on Princess Street. It's a lighted intersection. It's right on the right in the heart of where all the restaurants and entertainment is. 2 blocks from waterfront. And we bought this property for $695. And it had been owned by the guy that owned it. It was a local doctor. He owned a bunch of other random real estate. He bought it as an REO back after 2008 because it was a failed development. So it was just like a 26 space parking lot. It's tiny, really tiny. And we bought it from him at $695. I knew based on his P&Ls that, and his son was running it, collecting cash. They didn't have any automated systems. They couldn't take credit cards. I figured his derelict son was probably pocketing half the money that he was collecting, right? And so his P&L reflected, I think, like 44,000 or something like that of NOI the prior year. And so it wasn't a great deal as far as from a cap rate perspective, it wasn't a great deal at all. But I knew that rates were literally like triple. I knew that if we just brought credit card machines in there, that we could literally, at least double the revenue, if not triple it. And so that little parking lot does on average about a top line revenue, about $140,000 a year of top line revenue.
Wow.
And we bought that direct to owner. Yeah. So just do the simple math, and the expenses are low, right? It's an asphalt parking lot. It's got minimal property taxes, and insurance is next to nothing. And it's mostly automated as far as the operations. It's pretty simple, and 98% of the people pay with credit cards. We have an attendant there for special events every once in a while, where we might take cash, but the majority pay credit cards, and it's all, documented, and there's no theft and things like that. So, but that one deal could change someone's life. I mean, again, do the math on that one. That if you finance, we bought it cash, but if you were to finance that, even based on the revenues when we bought it, we wouldn't have got a lot of debt, but we probably could at least got 50% LTV on it, right? And so come up with, if you can you figure out a way to come up with $300,000, beg, borrow, steal? That deal would be a life changer for anybody. That would well exceed the $5,000 a month net in your pocket. And so again, and I'm not saying that we've bought a lot of deals like that, and it's not an anomaly either, because we have many other deals that have had similar results, right, in their own way, but they're out there. You just got to dig, right? Yeah. That came from a direct mailer that we did. We did one direct mailer to maybe like 600 parking operators, or parking lot owners in a couple different areas, different cities. And I got maybe 10 return phone calls from those mailers and had 3 good conversations. And the one that we sealed the deal on was that one. And that's all it took. I mean, that's it. That could awesome. Be a complete life changer for anyone listening to this.
Yeah. Literally the catchphrase, it's a little cheesy, but I love it. The group we're in, it's like, it only takes one deal, one time, change your life forever, in commercial real estate specifically. But that's a prime story of it. You bought one deal, and that's a crazy deal. But like you said, I love what you said, because I feel like people listening hear that, like, oh, that, it's crazy. He got lucky. It's one deal. I'll never be able to find that. But like you said, it's not an anomaly. They're out there. It's
how do you say it?
And that was the first parking deal we bought. So like and then we bought other real estate, but that was the first parking deal. So like we were new, were new in parking space, and we've since bought 150 million worth of parking. But that little one has kicked the ass on the return. I mean, everything else we bought has been great. It's been great returns, great investments, much bigger deals. But that little one, literally, and the average person could have bought that. You don't necessarily. You might have to syndicate, but you probably, if you're resourceful enough, you could have figured out a way to get that deal done. I guarantee the guy would have actually, if I had went to him and said, hey, I forget his name, but hey, I'll pay you $100,000 extra, but can you finance this thing for 150 down, right? Or 100 down or 50, whatever. And literally put a 1 year balloon on it, short term. And you'll have extra $100,000 in your pocket, go in and do my business plan, get it stabilized, get the revenues, literally almost triple what he had. And then you'd be able to get a bank loan. Like, just be creative, right? Yeah. I didn't go that route because we didn't have to, but like, I guarantee I'd have been on, he owned it free and clear. He would have carried back financing if I'd have been willing to pay him more for that property. I didn't want him to, but like, if I would have asked and gave him the incentive of 100 more grand, he sure as hell would have. And like, that still would have been worth my while to actually pay him $100,000 extra. And that's pretty aggressive just to get the deal done. But where there's a will, there's a way. And again, that still would have been, even at that $100,000 higher price point, would have been a game changer for anybody listening to this, doing their first deal.
Yeah. So I'm curious, because with mobile home parks, I've seen it firsthand where it can be really hard to finance them. And so if you get them under contract, direct to owner, how are you, I guess for someone that hasn't ever bought a park before, how are you financing them, one? And then two, how often do you see seller financing come up because it's been difficult to finance them?
Yeah. It's a great question. And, if I understand, if I identify the seller as someone I think would benefit from seller financing, then we'll have that conversation. If they have, reasons that they might not want to sell due to tax, concerns, then we'll have that conversation. And years past, we did a lot of seller financing deals, and mostly because it was very hard to get lending on these parks because a lot of banks and lenders didn't understand the asset class. It's a 90-day difference today. Now banks are fighting to lend in the space, and they're very competitive in the space. And I'd say that our seller profile has changed a little bit. Again, we probably do about one seller financing deal a year, and that's like a true mom and pop. They owned the property for 40 years, and they've got tax concerns. They also have relied upon that income for decades and decades, and so they want to continue receiving the income because they build a life around it, but they don't want to do the work, right? Because they've been actively involved in running the business, and so those are perfect candidates. Whereas like a lot of the other sellers we might work with are groups like ours, and so they don't have the flexibility. They probably have debt on it, underlying debt. They don't own it free and clear. They got to return capital to investors, right? Like they've got responsibilities that prohibit them from maybe carrying back financing. And so as far as like what type of debt we use, it's all across the board. It really depends on the property, but the cream of the crop is agency, so Fannie and Freddie debt. They're both very active in our space, and any property we buy, even if it doesn't qualify for Fannie and Freddie today, we will only buy it if we know that it will qualify for Fannie and Freddie once we've stabilized it or done whatever the value add plan is. And so, in Fannie and Freddie, they have certain criteria, that they look for. Loan amounts, one of them. Like they typically don't like to do below like $5 million loan amounts. It's got to have like paved streets. It's got to have concrete parking pads or paved parking pads. It's got to be of a certain quality. It's got to be even a tertiary market, but it's got to be within proximity of economic drivers, a variety of economic drivers. Can't be like in a one-horse town in the middle of Oklahoma or Kansas, right? And so, but we're using other banks as well. I mean, credit unions we've worked with, CMBS loans we've done, life companies we've done. It just really depends on the profile of the deal. So one thing that we try to steer clear of, and we have a number of them on the books, is recourse. And I'm not concerned about our ability to execute in the plan. It's just, it becomes prohibitive at some point in time from a balance sheet perspective when you've got 20, 30, $40 million of recourse against your name. And so for the most part, I need to know if we are going to do recourse, that there is a clear path to get non-recourse on it a couple years down the road, which Fannie and Freddie are non-recourse loans. So that's kind of like a little personal thing, but I know other folks out there, they'll sign their name on everything and be okay with it. And it's just, again, we haven't had like an issue, a situation where like, I've been, aside from '08 and all that, like personally impacted anything we've done where it's come back to bite me personally, but just trying to set ourselves up for a long, more sustainable company. In 10 years, if I want to, kind of start stepping away or get, just be on more of a board director situation, like I don't want my name then at that point in time on $50 million worth of loans. And so like, there's got to be a clear path in order to, have a continuation of the business that we build and to let someone else step into the role.
Yeah. 100%. I'm curious, kind of stepping back and thinking about who a lot of the people listening are. What, with all your experience in '08 up to this point, having a massive portfolio, what would be your recommendation for somebody getting into, commercial real estate, their first asset class to be? I'm sure you might say mobile home parks, but if that's the case, why?
Yeah, and I don't know if I would say. I mean, I love mobile home parks, and I can give you a compelling sales pitch as to why. But I think I always joke and say there's a million and one different ways you can make money in real estate. Pick one and go deep in it, right, and become the expert. And rephrase that question or restate that question so I fully understand. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
let's
no
start
worries.
that over again.
Basically, just if you were talking to somebody who came up to you and said, "Hey, I want to buy my first commercial real estate deal. What should I buy?" What would you tell them?
Yeah. I'd say I always start with location. I mean, location. That's first and foremost. It's interesting. I remember even myself doing this back in the day, like, on like LoopNet, or Crexy wasn't around. It was really just LoopNet. And you can filter by cap rate. People started shopping by cap rates, right? They started like doing this little exercise in their head of the, spreads between, maybe what the debt's at that I'd be able to get in this property and what are the cap rates? And they'll start looking in like podunk markets and finding things that are trading at 10 caps or 11 caps, and following that system where they're literally just only driven by what spread they think they can make, and that's going to be a great deal. But I would say it's quite the opposite, because location will never fail you, even if the actual property on top of the ground there doesn't do or doesn't perform as anticipated or as you laid out in your pro forma. Something else will work there if you get the right location. So I think locations, it's everything. It's got a wide variety of economic drivers. It's got, an in-migration, not an out-migration. People aren't moving away from the area. It's got diversity of employment and major employers that are there. It's got an educated job base. It's got universities nearby. It's got good school districts, depending on what it is. I mean, all those factors, all those demographics, I think should drive most of the decision. And it's once you've got that down, you find markets that you really like you guys do a lot of work up in Raleigh and the surrounding areas. It's really difficult to go wrong if you buy at a right basis in Raleigh. It's very difficult to actually not make your money back. Even if it doesn't perform as anticipated, to not make your money back at some point in the future, because you got the location right. That's that literally is the underlying fundamental that will drive your success, a multitude of others. But if you get the location wrong, there's very rarely ever plan B or plan C, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if I have, I could argue why I love mobile home parks and why I can still get in there and make money. And so I'll do that. Mobile home parks, there's still we typically buy larger stuff now, 100, 150, 200 spaces or larger. And so it's just a different ballgame in that arena. But there's still a very fragmented piece of our business in the smaller stuff, the 20, 30 spaces, 40 spaces. But those smaller ones, and then they're mostly mom and pop owned, you're not going to have the same competition of groups like ours trying to buy those. And so you'll have a little bit more negotiating power with the owner. Probably can figure out a way to tie in some owner financing into the deal and buy it at a much lower basis per space or, per lot than what we're paying for stuff in more core markets and more institutional style deals. And again, just like that parking deal I shared with you, like one 30 or 40 space mobile home park could be a game changer. Again, I'm just going to use the first mobile home park we bought because it was a game changer. That one in Atlanta I told you about, it was vacant. I think we paid $220 for it. We put about $180,000. It's amazing what you could renovate back then for $180,000. We renovated literally like 29 mobile homes for, 100, actually it was about $250,000. I think in total we did as far as rehab in that park. So we were all into it for, call it $500,000. We were all into that park for, and we had a private lender that lent. We put some of our own money into it, but we had a private lender that helped us do that deal. We did a cash out refinance. I think at year 2, we got 100% of our own capital back out of the deal. And then after debt service and all the other expenses, once that park was stabilized, a 34 space park, it made like $106,000 or $107,000 a year net after. I mean, again, then that was the first deal. I had horrible credit. I had a little bit of money in my name, but we had to bring a private lender in to help finance the transaction. A bank wouldn't do it because it was basically a vacant mobile home park. So all the hurdles in front of us, the market was still soft back then even. This is 2012. The market, we were still very much in recovery phase. In fact, certain areas, this is outskirts of Atlanta, it was still in tough shape because there was a lot of excess homes that were built. So like just empty homes sitting everywhere for a population that wasn't yet there. And so we had a lot of hurdles to overcome there. But again, we bought it right. We we knew there was opportunity there, and it didn't cost a lot of our pocket to get it done. And it turned into a great performer. I mean, we actually owned it up until I think we sold about 3 years ago, finally, but 500 into it, got our money back in 2 years, cash flowed literally 6 figures every year without failure. And when we sold, I think we sold it for 1.9, I think is what we sold it for.
That's crazy.
Like 10 years later, give or take.
And did you do that deal by yourself with lenders, or did you have a partner?
I had one other partner. Yeah, one other partner, a guy that I'd known for many, many years. We used to own a lot of houses together, and he had lost everything as well. So he was in my same boat. Like we were both in a shitty boat together. We just had a little bit of scratch that we pulled together, and we had dedication to make this happen. And we knew both of us were like literally the same to where this had to work. This was our money. Yeah. This was our one foray, and this had to be a winner. Hell or high water, it had to be a winner. So it worked out well. Again, and that's a small little park. I think there's opportunity there because it's still fragmented ownership in those smaller deals, and you can deal directly with the owners. Not as much competition, and a lot of them, if they're owned by the mom and pop, they typically do a pretty horrific job of operating them. And so which means a lot of opportunity, a lot of value add opportunity to get in there and get your hands dirty and drive revenues, and ultimately drive the top line values.
Yeah. So my question is, if you are one of those guys that's going to go look for these mom and pop mobile home parks, 130 pads, how do you understand what a good deal is? I talk to a lot of people and they're like, man, I just don't understand how I understand what a good deal is. Like, what does that look like for people?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I mean, I think what you do is, like we talked about way earlier in the show, is there's a ton of meetups. There's a ton of online resources. There's forums. There's podcasts specific on mobile home park investment. I mean, that's a really long answer to your question and it means something different to me than what it might mean to the next person in line. And so, but I think that you need to get in and if you want to learn more about the niche and understand it more, start diving into the resources that are out there and available, most of them for free. Go surround yourself with others that are actually out there doing it. And then you'll have a better understanding or be able to paint your own picture of like, what's a good deal to you? Because a lot of that's even derived from like, what are you hoping to achieve in your financial life? I mean, I don't know, like what do you need to do? Why are you buying this? Do you have tax issues that you need? Like you're making a lot of money somewhere else and you're looking for a good tax write-off. Does this thing need to actually, hit double-digit cash on cash returns because you've got this grandeur vision of like, all I need is $6,000 a month of passive income in order to live the life of my dreams. This next deal has to do that. Or does it not have to? Does it have to do half that? So, but there's enough resources out there where folks can, again, like I said in the beginning, like if you ever say like, I don't know, or I don't know how, or I can't, you literally haven't even typed it in Google or you haven't done any research on YouTube.
Yeah.
Because all the answers are out there. Everything you need, at least theoretically, the answers are there. And then once you get some of the theory down, you can go meet people, get to know people that are in the business, that are in the industry, and rub elbows with them, and then see it firsthand at that point.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good answer.
And guys, I'm so sorry. Actually, I didn't realize what time it was. I've got to jump off. I've got another podcast I'm actually going to be interviewed on in 10 minutes ago, but I told him I was running a little late.
So no worries. Apologies. Yeah, no worries. I was about to wrap up anyways. Last thing is just if anybody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best place to do it?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn quite a lot, and so you can find me there. My last name's unique enough that just type in Kevin Bupp should be the first result that comes up. And then investwithsunrise.com. It's our company. You can learn about current offerings. We've got like a lot of case studies up there. We've got some white papers we wrote on the parking investment space and mobile home park space. My podcast is up there as well. You can download it there, or Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts on. And I'm not hard to track down. Again, you just Google my name, you probably track me down one way or another. It's awesome. The downside of having a weird last name.
Yeah, no worries. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kevin. This was incredible. Lots of value. And if you guys are listening to this, go give Kevin a follow or reach out to him. Let him know you appreciated all the value provided, and we'll see you in the next one.